So I was hoping to talk about food cuisine today, Greek food in particular, but something else caught my attention that I wanted to just discuss with myself. So we've been doing a lot of research and trying to figure out why some of our movies are being suppressed by the algorithms, and then other ones aren't, and so forth. So we started collecting data from different platforms and content policy guidelines and all that put together, and we're able to deduce and consolidate the data into, like, quantitative stuff to figure out what actually is going on, and why are the algorithms changing so much and drastically and fast and quickly the way they've been doing it. uh, so I put together like a grid, because these days you're not only just making a film and saying, okay, there's blood in it, I'll take away the blood, or there's sex, I'll take away the sex. There's many different layers of the way a film can trigger or not trigger an algorithm, and if once you trigger a negative algorithm, then it's pretty much over, for your film that you've worked so hard on for the past 2 or 3 years. And we know by now that it could be one word, it could be a cigarette in the background, it could be a poster on the wall, it could be, breathing, because ASMR is now considered a triggering characteristic. So ASMR videos are no longer running through algorithms; they're having to do stuff on their own. But ASMR was never a serious consideration. It was always meant for, I don't want to say like clickbait, but it was always meant for, like, for clickbait, you know um it wasn't used as a tool that was realistically progressive or therapeutic. I think people were saying, let's boom mic my cat, my dog, and that sounds interesting. I'll get 6 million views. And so they realized that that doesn't make sense. Why are we paying for that? And they represent the sort of the platform, the streaming universe. They. And so I've been noticing it little by little, how it's been progressing, the way they've been looking at films and the algorithms, and why are certain things doing better than others. And it sort of came to me, and I wasn't really acknowledging it. I mean, I kind of talked to filmmakers in jest about, yeah, 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 we're making TV now. We're TV filmmakers, or we're TV makers, um, and we're YouTubers. And so television, for the most part, for the past, I don't know when the FCC started outlining their policies, but radio, of course, any forms of mass communication have been traditionally regulated by the FCC, and very specific things, very down to a minute detail. And I kind of didn't want to acknowledge it, but that's what was happening in terms of the streaming platforms, and how they would how would they be viewing films, because it wasn't a human, it's a computer seeing what's triggering the algorithms and so forth. And so once I started putting this data together, I realized more and more that films have to go through this process and a set of guidelines, more or less. Now, these aren't rules, because the FCC have rules. They say, if you curse, okay, we're going to penalize you. We're going to charge you 10 grand. Because everybody knows all the fines that Howard Stern got on his show, triggering fines here and there. And I don't know how much he paid in fines. I mean, I think it was, as I recall, it was like upwards of several $1 million. I'm not sure. And we know Trump sued CBS for 7 million, because it was slander. So I had a feeling that we as filmmakers were headed down a path that we were going to be sort of scrutinized under what I consider sort of almost FCC guidelines. And so the data I started looking at today, pretty much confirmed what I had thought. And this is a very informal talk. I'm just going to go through random notes because I haven't even absorbed everything. And it's a very sobering report. So when making a movie, there's sort of a guideline. And now, by the way, the data I've pulled has come from all different platforms. It's not just like Google or Amazon or Tubi. But it should be known that the majority of these mainstream platforms, the ones that are going out to mass audiences, the ones that you'll see when you turn on your Roku, they generally think alike in terms of how they're programmed and the algorithms that are set forth, meaning that they all adhere to a similar policy. There's very little derivation from one to the other. And this, first and foremost, relates mostly to AVOD, which is the advertising based situation. Like, no one's going to pay $5.99 to see our films for a rental. Let's be serious. No one's going to do that. And the chances are they won't do it for your film either. If you're listening to this show, you're not obviously in a studio system or whatever. Um, so we rely on these ad based streaming platforms. Like Amazon, like Netflix is launching, like Tubi has been for the past 8 years, where it's basically up to the advertisers to sort of dictate what movies and how they want their products being advertised. And in the end, it's all about the ad money coming through these platforms because that's how they show profit. The more ads, the larger tiers of ads that they can charge, the better that they're showing profit to their to their partners, their investors, and their corporations. But in doing so, they must self sort of, how do you say, so what I was getting at was that the platforms are having sort of to self-govern themselves, because once they have a problem by putting on the wrong content, then they're at the face of potentially the real FCC. And I haven't confirmed this for a fact, but I believe that streaming platforms like Netflix, for example, fall under the FCC guidelines. I can't say that for sure, but I have a feeling that they do. So we put together this sort of guide based upon sort of research, trial and error, and trying to stay up to date and current to what the algorithms are saying. And so, for example, we're going to go in order. We're going to go from production to metadata to distribution afterwards. But for example, like when you're picking a subject to make as a film, some safe areas would be like if it's a psychological conflict, a movie about depression, guilt, identity crisis, real life. It's safe because it avoids physical triggers because you're not taunting people. You're talking about something introspective about somebody going through life. Maybe it's divorce, for example. Um, Mysteries are good because mysteries come back because they're historically they come from like a, how do you call it, a scholarly background, so to speak. So there's this sort of a narrative there that mysteries indicate a certain level of education. It's not sort of what they call lowbrow material. That's why. So that would be somewhere like maybe like Knives Out, for example. And surrealism could be anything that like Tim Burton does. Um, you know, and within that parameter of the of a mystery, sort of surrealistic mystery, you can go down journeys, sort of what we nightmarish paths, that type of thing, as long as is that you're not putting in subliminal meanings or hidden meanings. And one thing that's a deep trigger for something like this, anything that involves like dreaming or dreams or mind control, is the fact that it's mind control, that and hypnosis. Those are huge red flags. So I would not attempt to do a movie that's about mind control, whether it's through ideology, whether it's through technical devices. For example, if there's a movie and the person has to wear an Oculus and it takes them to another world, and there's a person of authority that's having them run through this Oculus, and they're and in some and telling them what they're perceiving and how to perceive. You can't do that. It's very dangerous, and that falls into the mind control category. Um, Science and philosophy, those are safe areas, but the problem is that who would have ever thought that that science would be so political, but yet it is. It's science is debated every day, and there's two, three schools that will nobody will ever win on this issue of science. So that's something you have to be sort of careful, and you don't want to propose, like, if you are going to do a movie about science, you don't want to propose theories that haven't been proven and see that they're fact, uh especially as it relates to biological things or vaccines. Like, you wouldn't want to do something where somebody invents this vaccine and it's based upon psilocybin or whatever, something, and it has been proven. that could be triggering because somebody might take that as gospel and then experiment, and they don't want that to happen. Uh, so while you can do a movie about science, you have to be very careful when it's science that borders or goes into the cognitive and psychological world. Like you can do science about animals or dinosaurs, right? But you could not go into certain things of like aliens so like yeah, that's another thing. For example, this idea that I've seen a lot of movies where aliens are mind controlling humans, and the humans are giving themselves to the alien world, considering them the ultimate force. That you're getting into very dangerous territory, and you're also getting into dangerous territory because of the whole controversy with aliens. Area 51. Did it happen? Did it not happen? Are there secret covert operations going on? That's a ballpark area that you don't want to get involved. Now, for those of you that want to express yourself completely and do what you want, you don't really need to listen to the rest of this. This is just sort of some suggestions, advice, that doesn't necessarily have to be taken. My feeling for us is that we want our films to be seen than not seen. And, these days we know that even just to recoup, let's say, a $10,000 budget back, you need 1 million views. And that's very hard to get these days, especially with all these things going against you, these different algorithms. So you want to make sure that you put your best foot forward, and you're not going to like finish your film after 2 years and like you get hit with 100 different things going against you like a gauntlet, because you're not going to survive. You're going to survive beaten, barely alive, if you miss all these points. I'm not saying that every film can be so pure, because every look, filmmaking is a very introspective and subjective experience. It comes from you. It comes from your experience, your mind, your life experiences, and so forth. So your story is going to be different than someone else. But there are certain things that are debatable that you have to conform by, in order to get that wider audience. And then this isn't outright censorship. No one's saying we're not going to run your film on this platform if you have this, like if you have a decapitation. No one's saying that. But in so many words, you get the idea because you'll know you're blocked. Now, see, now we have the advantages that we get real time data, and so we could pull up 25 movies and tell you which ones are being suppressed because it's obvious. It's obvious because one movie will make $100, one will make 50 cents. So you know clearly well that something's suppressing that movie that's generating 50 cents. Um, and it could be deadly, it could be lethal if you go into this not knowing what you're doing once your film is done, and you should know a lot of this, during the making of the film. Even before you decide to make a film, you should at least consider some of it that's going on. And they don't teach a lot of this either. Aggregators are so busy following their own ways to stay current, and it's just a mishmash to stay current and up and to keep track of every single update, that at some form you must rely on technology to help you decide certain things, whether it's saying, look, we want 10 movies for distribution, 10 horror movies, give us 10 that don't fall into this category, that are safe, give us 10 movies that don't have sacrilegion, give us 10 movies that don't have chanting, stuff like that. So another safe territory is relationships and intimacy. So rom-coms are good. Rom dramas are good. Human warmth. People want to be inspired by that. You could take a relationship that's falling apart. You know, they're getting back together. Look, heck, he can be a cop for all they care. You know what I'm saying? But the core of the movie is this interdrama between the characters, and that's pretty safe. That's pretty safe as long as it's not based on true crime or whatever. When you get into true crime, that's a whole different territory. Or if you're going to go into something like the Marilyn Monroe story, which actually you can't because she's copyrighted, but somebody like that that's based in fact, and you're purporting to be if you're hypothesizing why this marriage or this divorce failed, and it's based in fact or based in history, then you're going into dangerous territory. For those of you that are musicians, music and performance and art is pretty safe, pretty safe. I have my own project about a guy that wants to put together a 5-person band. He's like a stockbroker, and he's depressed, and he's fed up with his life as a stockbroker, so he starts his band. And so we have rehearsals in the movie. Has to find a guitarist, find the right vocalist, putting together this team, and then they're going to perform at whatever Carnegie Hall in downtown LA. No. So that's safe. That's pretty much safe. You could make a movie about a painter. You could make a movie about an actor that has opening night jitters. You can make a movie about a director who's depressed. He's not sure he's got the right actors. Um, that's what all that jazz kind of fits in that category, but all that jazz has other stuff that doesn't fit. We go to faith and spirituality, which is a double-edged sword. We know that there's a large market for faith-based films, very large, but you have to come from it from an earnest point of view. And that's why a lot of these faith-based movies don't work because they're not coming from people who are actually denominational or um, sectarian, whatever. They don't follow it, and so you see it, and it rings very dishonestly because they're doing it just to do it because it's faith-based. But if it's a true movie about faith, like let's say someone survived a disaster and they're trying to find meaning in their life and they need the spirituality, that works. That works. But the issue is that you cannot specifically say what the religion or the spirituality is. Like you couldn't say like I believe in God, or God's leading me here, or I'm following Allah or Muhammad. You can't discuss, you can't really explicitly state all of that. You can talk about a group coming together and they're each sharing their own spiritual stories. They're going on a retreat. They're learning music. They're learning painting. That is safe and it's inspiring for the people, for the human condition. I mean, it's about the human condition. It's in it. It's inspiring for society. So that type of film that they encourage. Um, there's something called memories and regret. So that could be sort of a series of flashbacks. I don't mean memories where someone's going to do a brain device and then they pull your memory out. That's dangerous. But you could do something about reminiscing about the past, nostalgia. He goes back in time to the 1930s because he wants to be there when the first sound movies get made or something like that. So, um, then we go into what the actual content is. So once you decide what your subject is, and by the way, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This might be a second part that I'll follow up with, but I was so I don't know what the word is, sick to my stomach after I read the results of these reports that I wanted to just come on and convey it. And some of it we had already addressed with filmmakers who don't understand. I say, listen, see what I said? You didn't listen to me, and this is what happened. You got suppressed. Uh, so once you decide what you're going to make now, then you have to figure out the process of making it and what do you do. Now, obviously, violence, boom, 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 boom. So uh, a lot of suggestions these days is you can't have it. Well, everybody knows from the days of VHS days, you can't have a gun at you like that because that's a trigger effect. Even a finger. So that's a trigger. You can't go explicit on the killing. I don't care if it's an action film or it's a horror movie. You can't linger on the killing. It's literally got to be like the days of the westerns, boom, 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 and everybody falls. There's no blood, no linger on it, and then that can pass. But it's when you start, like for example, like Taxi Driver. I really question, can that movie be made today? Now, it was a studio movie, so they can get a lot of things passed through that us indies can't. But could something like that wallows in the excess of violence, could that be made? I say no, not under these new under these new algorithms and policies. Number two, everybody knows is sexuality. So, as we're becoming this globalization society where it's all oneness, and namely that oneness is being dictated by the West, which I've got an issue with because now we're all going to be oneness, and then what are we teaching? What is the rest of the world learning from us other than LOL and these stupid emojis? But as we become globalized and we're trying to homogenize our cultures with each other, then you've got to do something that fits all cultures. So nudity is one, and sexuality. So obviously we know that maybe there's 50 countries where, sexuality isn't spoken about in the open. Um, Nor is it, shown explicitly in their works. Even though, ironically, ancient civilizations had nude, robust, cherubic deities, nude. There's plenty of portrayals of sexuality and the sex act itself on ancient art, especially like the Romans. But what they're saying now is that they're saying to be safe is that you suggest it. Now, I don't know what that means. I think they're saying like they're saying, for example, like silhouette, the intimacy, you get too close, but not. I mean, I think it's a personal thing. Everybody knows when a scene goes too far in sexuality, and it basically outlives what the purpose it meant to be to begin with. So you know that. So there's a lot that you can do. Like, I mean, I think about the 1940s. This is Hayes era, of course. And some of those 40s movies were very steamy. And it's just like two people talking and very, very steaming. So there's creative ways to do that. I'm not talking about pre-haze, because pre-haze is the reason why they slapped the haze together, because you had rape, you had molestations, you had exploitation of women, and that's why the Hayes administration came in, because they said, "Listen, this is not decent. let's uh, let's put a stop to this and gear it, because media, particularly films, can be weaponized. They're a very strong tool, uh, and very impressionable tool, and so we have a duty to be somewhat responsible. But yet, we as filmmakers are artists, so we have to express ourselves in unique ways. We can't all look the same. You can't have the same movie. Not, like it used to be, like they're saying, like, give me this, give me this, give me this horror movie, give me a chainsaw movie, give me this, give me Amityville movie. Now they're saying, like, don't give me these that look the same, because I have 100 movies that look the same. So, they're giving you conflicting data, because one thing it's saying do this, but then they're saying give us something unique. Well, how do you be unique when you're stuck with strict policy guidelines like this? So anyway, everybody knows, though, no nudity. I mean, that's pretty much given. And I was saying, part of like the globalization of society is that, we have lost our human contact. I don't know if we can get it back, but we've lost the intimacy. Like, when's the last time you got close to somebody and spoke to somebody in a public situation, like at a party? Yeah, I used to go to parties and strangers. We talk face to face, ear to ear, and that's just not there anymore. And we obviously know that there's a desexualization of society that's resulted in infertility, high levels of infertility, because it's just not there. It's not encouraged. And I get it, because look, we're overpopulated. There's no way we can sustain all the people, and just the people we have, we can't sustain with the money. There's not enough money flowing. There's not enough anything flowing, and that's the problem. So I don't know who's they, but I mean, their agenda was, if we desexualize, we can address this out of hand control of population that's going on. And you're seeing that in movies now, because movies are reflective of the way we are, and they also gear us. So if you don't see sexuality in a movie now, you're not going to think about it. I But this has been going on for a long time. This has been going on since, like, even like the 90s, when television started removing some of the body parts on the James Bond opening credit sequences. They actually removed, like, the nipples, uh, and they didn't tell anybody they were doing this. You had to be like an insider to find out, but they were actually smoothing it out so you wouldn't see the nipples. And this is the human body. What are you gonna do? Are you now? What are we gonna do? Are we gonna now morph the human body a certain way that we want, that's approved by us? I don't know. Substance abuse, third. That's clear. I mean, when's the last time you saw a movie with weed? Cocaine's very dangerous. I think this is where we have to be very responsible. Even when a movie doesn't condone drug use, let's say a movie like Rush with Jason Patrick and Jennifer Jason Leigh, it doesn't condone it. It actually, it criticizes it. It tells you it's deadly, obviously, but yet it wallows in these long sequences of highs. They're shooting up. and it wallows in that. So that never be allowed. That would never be allowed today. But the problem is, I would say no drugs. And so I've some filmmakers have said, well, what if we create like this candy or this this not a placebo, but like this alternate drug that gives people a euphoric high. So no, you can't do that because that's, that's still a drug. It's affecting something physiologically, neurologically. You're saying that in the movie. You can't do that. So those are the top three. And then the fourth one, which is absolutely crucial, is self-harm. So no talk about suicide. Obviously no acts of suicide, no discussion about suicide. That is a very, very important element because the youth today is so impressionable, and they don't see the value. Like when you don't see the value of life, and when you don't see something coming down the road, you feel like you've got nothing, and so then you medically you self medicate, and so something like taking one's life, uh, doesn't have the profound negativity or the stigma that it once had. And so for that matter, they're saying, don't, you can't just have it in a movie because people could use that as an excuse. And I don't know that maybe it goes back. Well, first of all, Japan is obsessed with death. We know that because, for example, when they do executions, well, everyone knows harakiri. The execution is it's a self execution. It is a form of suicide. It is. I mean, it is suicide. It's ritual suicide is what it is. Uh, so, but what was happening in Japan, where there were these copycat suicides, like young kids in teen groups, doing charcoals in their cars. So, I mean, you read it on the news, and so there was this copycat situation, an epidemic that was happening among youth, and that was directly related to movies that they were seeing. So I fully agree that, unless it's something that I don't know how to say it, something that you can turn into inspirational, which I don't know how you do. I guess you could. I would stay away from that topic. Then there's religion, which is still a large part. And as we becoming global, I mean, what is it? Number one religion is Christianity, and then you have Muslim. Number two is Muslim, right? So a lot of that is difficult. For example, like Latin America, you can do an exorcist movie, but if it's anything sacrilegious, uh or satanic, then you're blocked out of maybe a dozen countries. Anything in Latin America, anything where there's Catholicism. So I technically that could be the Philippines too, which is very heavy in Catholicism. Um, so that's there's the idea that if you do a mockery, I want to say there was a mockery, a religious like exorcist. Wasn't there with Leslie Nielsen or something? Where it was a satire and it was a parody. So that you can get away with it. I still think it's playing with fire. I wouldn't do so much. But you could do like a Love at First Bite for those of you that remember that movie. You could probably do that and get away with that. Where it was a comedy and everybody knew it was a comedy and it wasn't posing as anything but that. Okay, and then part of horror is body horror. Uh, and by the way, one of the shows I'm doing coming up is I'm going to go over jobs in the movie business that have just completely evaporated. For example, like the person that used to edit, like we used to on the days of shooting on film, like 35, you would shoot it, you would edit it using tape splices, and then you'd take it over to a negative cutter to edit the original negative that you shot with and piece it together, and then from there you made your second negative and then the print that went to the theaters. Well, the negative cutter job, which had existed for basically 100 years, right? I think the last negative cutting job was The Master by P.T. Anderson. That was it. That's the final one. uh that job's totally gone from the industry, doesn't exist. And I could name you 20 jobs, but that's gonna be another show. So, but what I'm getting at is that there's this issue of body horror, which basically means like prosthetics, and blood and pumping blood and the mechanisms for devising blood. Think Tom Savini, which I wanted to be. I wanted to really be Tom Savini. I wanted to be this guy. I tried to figure out how to make the best potion of blood. the best colors, the best tubing, so I could emulate how could it come up your arms, through your heart, through your neck, you know. Uh, so that the job of the physical makeup artist, I feel, is virtually gone, or going to be pretty soon, unless they reinvent themselves. Because with technology and now these guidelines, the new guidelines, it's gone. So obviously we talked about that. No decapitation, no limbs getting cut off. Uh, they say bodily fluids. No copious uh visual imagery of bodily fluids. So that's blood. You can't have blood splatter. You can't have pools of blood. You can't. So that's that's what we're talking about for that. Now, I'm not saying too much. I mean, I now call, like, the cult movies that that these people, well, there's a group of filmmakers in our circle that make these gore movies, and I think that they're going to have to reinvent themselves, because their successes have been on movies that have had heads getting cut off, fingers getting chopped, people throwing up blood on each other, uh breasts getting cut off, you name it. Well, that's gone. That's gone now. It's gonna be gone. And they're living off of Blu-ray releases. But look, Sony doesn't even support Blu-rays anymore. They don't even manufacture them. So the Blu-ray days are numbered. And I was talking to a distributor who's still doing Blu-ray, and I was like, my gosh, you're still doing physical. I mean, good for you. That's amazing. But he was saying, like, those days are numbered, because a lot of that relied on retail, and all the stores, the brick and mortars, are pretty much gone. I mean, you still have Barnes and Noble, but they don't sell DVDs. They sell coffee, as if we never need another damn coffee house, you know? Okay, so this still continues on this. I got to get through this show. I get so rattle on. So graphic nudity, we know that. So simulated intercourse, which I was surprised that you can't do. But what I think, more than anything, I think they mean, like, when somebody, like the female, straddles and there's a movement going back. And I knew this, like, maybe 10 years ago. They said you can't have the woman arch back, because that shows too much, like, pleasure and sensuality. So you can't do that. Uh, so I would just simply stay away from it. You know, uh, I mean, technically, sex is something that's behind closed doors. I mean, unless your movie needs to do it. You know, People say, why did I make these Emmanuel movies without any nudity? And I'm saying, well, look at these things. I wanted somebody to see my works in some form, but look at these guidelines that I've got to follow. Because I'm now known as the man who makes the Emmanuel movies with no nudity. I'm exonerated now. I'm going over these points here. Yeah, so violence, no stabbings. If you do stabbing, it's pretty quick or off screen. Strangulation, this is interesting. No strangulation in close-up and lingering. And that explains why my movie Choke was suppressed, which is an art house movie, but it was inspired by Hitchcock's Torn Curtain. And if you know that movie, Paul Newman, there's a scene where Paul Newman's killing the Russian agent, and it's a 3-minute strangulation scene. And that scene inspired my movie Choke. But you can't do that. I don't know the specific reason about that. Like, why? Like, what's the difference between strangulation and poisoning, for example? But they don't say poisoning. They don't say you can't do poisoning. Sexual assault. Yeah, I mean, unless it's a movie that is really a social drama about rape or something to the effect of that, I'd stay away from that. They're very, very cautious. I mean, we literally had a movie but this was a horror movie. Uh, he gets killed by the monster. He falls on a woman who's wearing just a bra. Like, no nudity. He just falls. He puts his face on, like, he falls over, and his face is on a bra, and we got blocked. Now they get blocked. We got to strike against that. So, you know, child endangerment, we knew that. We got to be very, very careful about that. Yeah, you can't have children in peril or being abused by family members. A film that we had, there was a child actor, but the child actor wasn't directly involved in the violent scenes, but just the fact that there was a child in this movie that had gratuitous gore, because literally at the end there's pools of blood, uh, that got flagged. And then my feeling is that with children today, why put yourself into a situation? Because there's such a can of worms. Like the children are underage, so their parents are in charge of the decisions. Usually, parents are not in the right mind. There is no jurisdiction other than some teacher to take care of the kid on set, but they teach them nothing on set. You're paying all this money for a school teacher on set, and the teacher doesn't do anything, honestly. So it's a fake sense of security just to fulfill these requirements for the labor laws. So I would say go again. I would say no. Why even bother to have a child in your film, especially if it's a genre film? Now, if you told me it's a movie about a little girl and she's like raising or she's rescuing kittens or dogs, it's different, right? That's different. But that's not the circle that we're in, and a lot of people aren't in that circle. Uh, Terrorism and extremism, yeah, everybody knows that. But why talk about it? I mean, there's a handful of movies. What was the movie with Daniel Day-Lewis about the IRA, the Russian army? And then, but I think they're talking more specific things, like some of the terrorist groups in the Middle East. I think the issue is like if you're spreading their ideology. But my feeling is that if you don't depict history the way it's going on and you're hiding it, how can you say what history is? Because, like, for example, the Battle of Algiers, 1962 movie by Gio Pontecorvo, Italian director. It talks about the French occupation of Algiers and how the sleeper cells of terrorists started forming. And the movie is told from the point of view of the leader of this terrorist group. They call him an extremist group, Ali Lafont. And you follow his eyes going through that, and you follow his faith and what he believes in, and so that movie could only have been told and by through his point of view, but yet he's a part of that extreme group, and there's a lot of extreme talk and terrorism in that movie. There is. I mean, it's based on true events. So conspiracy, we knew that. What's his name? The channel's being pulled. Alex, forgot his name. I don't watch him, but we know that because people don't know what to believe, and I'm just amazed how rapidly advanced AI has become. Uh, that everything looks so believable. I mean, where I'm seeing these underground stuff where there's real celebrities interacting with presidents, and you wouldn't know the difference. It looks so real. So I get this conspiracy claim. Um, vaccines, they keep up vaccines, aliens for sure. So it's funny because like 10 years ago, everybody wanted an alien movie. Now they're saying no because aliens implies mind control. So don't have aliens. So it's like, we don't have to think. You're going to always have to keep revising your philosophies every year. Um, you can't do, yeah, well, this is obvious. Religious satire. You can't badmouth religion. Everybody knows that. We know and respect religions, and we've seen enough disturbing events happen when religion gets mocked by people for the sake of art. Like I don't condone that. I don't believe in it. You know what I mean? And do you really need to make a movie about that? Why do you want to make a movie that's critical about a religion? I mean, how does that get us? How does that progress us, Excessive profanity, everybody knows that. My feeling is don't use the F-bomb at all, because now they're saying, okay, you can have 3 F-bombs. Pretty soon they'll say 1, then you say no, and then you're screwed because you gotta redo your whole movie revised. I'm constantly revising my movies every 2 years just to adapt. And to be honest with you, my movies when they first came out like 15, 20 years ago, they were strong. They were strong. There's a lot of sexuality, there's a lot of violence. So every 2 years I'm revising it. And I'm not saying that they're completely tame because they're not, but a lot of the core and the essence of maybe why some people liked them early on was because of that. And now that's gone. But I'm getting a new audience watching it. I just hope they realize the context that they're watching it in. Okay, so now we go into like these. Now I'm not saying this gives everybody creative license, but if something is considered art house or artistic, I don't want to say you get away with things, but certain things don't trigger the algorithms. So in others, we talked about that. We talked about if there's a love making scene and it's all in silhouette, you can get away with that. But the problem is you can't get away with the silhouette and moaning. Like you can get the movement, and I'm sure at some point they're gonna say, "Oh, it's silhouette, but I can see the little breast here, the curvature. We don't want that." And so my feeling is that, you know, go silhouette, get creative, do some nice lighting. You want your film to be seen, so don't overdo it on the eroticism, you know? Um, Psychological horror. That would be like The Shining, an example where there's just this constant barrage of of physical and mental stress on the characters and on the audience, but specifically on the characters, that it's to the point that it's gratuitous. So The Shining, obviously it's Kubrick, it's Warner Brothers, so I get it. Could it be made today that on that level? No, no. I don't think you can do I don't think you can do to that extent the psychological they call it repetition, I guess. Dream sequences, we talked about that. We talked about that you got to be very, very, very careful about mind control and and dreamscapes. So what they suggest is that they suggest if someone's going to do that, then you go back to like the days of the 60s and 70s television movies where there's a cloud, smoke billowing. So you actually get, okay, this is the dream. It's not continuous, you know. It does, it does end. So you could do that and have nice moody colors. What comes to mind is like some of the Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe movies. Do you remember if you ever saw those? Do you remember the nice, very rich color and the smoke coming through here? Jack Nicholson walking through the castle. That's what they're talking about if you must do a dream sequence. Um, Experimental reality. Yeah, I mean that we talked about that already. That's sort of like, yeah, telling people that there's another reality that exists. And maybe it doesn't, maybe in your world it does. I don't know. I don't know. Neon, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of coloring you can get away with. Not to cover up certain things, but a lot of coloring to get away with what you want to feel like reflections and the types of colors you choose. They don't want anything too rich, nothing too much hot pink. They want like pastels. They want lights up. They don't want the density of a police blue and red light. Mm-mm. It's gotta be lighter. Um, Safe emotional themes. Yeah, part of it is like what the French and the Europeans did in the uh I think from the 50s. When did they have their censorship board? Excuse me, I got for example, like in Vertigo, there was two endings shot. There was the ending that we know where well, spoilers, everybody knows the if you saw Vertigo, you know the ending. So, but anyway, on the French version of Vertigo, there was a coda added where Jimmy Stewart comes home to Barbara Bel Geddes, and on the radio you hear Gavin Elster. It's like a police. It says like, and in today's news, Gavin Elster was arrested for such and such crime for murdering his wife, something like that, right? So and that's showing like they did that because under the French rule you had to have a punishment or repercussion for doing something bad. You couldn't just do something bad and get away with it. So in other words, let's say your character steals, you know. If he realizes he steals and he becomes better through therapy or help, they want to see that in a movie. Um Spiritual awakening, like I stopped drinking all my life, and now I see the world completely. I can love, I can live, you know? I'm getting to somewhere. They want to see like a progression that that you're getting better, that you're propelling society and helping, that you're contributing to society, you know? Love conquers all. They like that. They love conquers all. Love it, love it, love it. So strangers aging yeah, they want to see they don't want to see movies about people dying, like especially uh older people. And if you do move a movie like that where people are old and there's no hope for them or something, they don't want that. So they want you to do a movie about somebody that's aging and about to death. Maybe they're terminal, but they want to create something in their life and create a legacy for themselves. I guess Cocoon, maybe. No, Cocoon was more abusing the life force. But I could say along that lines, you know. Uh maybe there's three kids or somebody or three teenagers or young people that went into crime, and this painter teaches them about painting or writing. Well, that's Good Will Hunting, right? Kind of. Well, actually, they weren't criminals, so they want to see that like salvation. You see, so you're see you get you're seeing like a repetition of what's going on. They want to see positivity, they want to see growth, they want to see the world growing because of what you have to see, the appreciation, that sort of thing. Okay, now this is more filmic stuff. And so if you're not actually shooting a movie, some of this is irrelevant to you. But anyway, long takes. Um, and long take could be like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, could be a minute. Don't want to see like these 5-second shots, 10-second shots that I do in all my movies. They don't want to see that because there's subliminal stuff and people, the mind can't comprehend all of that, what it's seeing. But I mean, look, you go. I'm influenced by guys from the '60s, you know, who grew up doing like Godard and grew up doing experimental stuff. My work doesn't have subliminal messages. I like a collage of images. You know, like it's sort of like painting when you take this color and these two. uh, you get something bigger than what each individual thing was. And so when I do these montages, these collages in my films, I'm taking all these pieces and it's creating a better collective. But they're saying no because it's subliminal. So they want long takes, which is fine by me. I mean, I love Russian cinema, French cinema. You know, even David Lynch. There'll be scenes like particularly like Blue Velvet when they go to see Dean Stockwell's home. There's like one shot, people walking back and forth, back and forth. She goes to the closet to see her child. She comes back out. They're singing, they're dancing. That works. They want to see takes like that, but not chop cutting, boom, 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 boom. That will never work. Reflections in mirrors. Yeah, I don't know what that means. Um, yeah, lighting that's sort of monochrome. So in other words, I talked about being creative with lighting, but they want you to be creative to a certain point. They don't want you to be creative on lighting where you have like 12 lights giving you different schematics and patterns. Like they don't want you to create a Rorschach test out of 15 lights because then that's up to self-interpretation and people might interpret it the wrong way, just like they do a Rorschach test. You show it to somebody and somebody will say, "Well, that looks like a car," and then somebody will say, "Well, that looks like Donald Trump," or somebody will say that that looks like an airplane, you know, or whatever. So they don't want things like that. That's left up to a lot of interpretation because and don't forget the youth we're talking about, 18 to 24. They'll interpret it the way they want and then condone actions by saying that. Um, Sound, natural wind, humming is good. Uh, Emotions where you can tell someone's sad, someone's happy, the silence. I try to do more silence now in movies because that conveys a lot of the human emotion, but also practically it translates to every other language because everybody knows what it looks like when you're mad, or if you're happy or in agreement or you're depressed, you know. Um, I'm not saying everything's 100% accurate. Some of this is sort of deducing data, but for example, hold on. Like for example, like on YouTube, they'll take PG-13 content and MA so long as it doesn't have nudity and gore. And like Tubi and Amazon, they'll take TV-14. Like TV-14 is TV4. Like if you really want to get the widest audience that you can for your film, you want to stay TV-14. They'll take TVMA, but you know how that works. You get blocked. I don't know the population of kids and in the country and how many of families that have parental controls on their Amazon. I tend to think the reason why they're installing these policies is because parents don't have parental controls on their kids' content anymore because kids know how to circumvent it easily. So they're saying, just give it to us without this controversial content because we know that the parents won't do their job anyway. So Tubi and Amazon, yeah, TV 14, TVMA, you get blocked. Apple TV, Roku, same thing, PG 13 and MA. They're very cautious about what you put into your thumbnails and your tags. You can be very careful about that. International sets the bar lower because there's a lot more censorship in Europe, ironically, in a lot of places. So they want stuff that's for like the 12 plus. I forget the Australian system. I think it's like PGR double R. It's like double R or something. So they want 12, and then no sexuality, no LGBT, because LGBT you get blocked in I don't know how many countries, which is that's are we still in caveman times, everybody? Come on, you know? There's been homosexuality since man existed, since the dawn of time, okay? So okay, now we go to audio. I didn't think this was gonna be a long show. It's not even, yeah. Okay, so now we go. Now this is still when you're on set and you're recording audio. And this actually comes into play because people think, like, I'll talk to filmmakers and they'll say, "Oh, well, I didn't put this much blood in, I'm fine. I didn't do that. I didn't do any swearing, that's fine." I get it, but there's a whole different world of audio algorithms that will block you if you don't follow accordingly. So we talked about sexuality. You can't have moaning. And everybody knows when a moan is uncomfortable. You know that it almost seems like you're voyeur. It almost seems voyeuristic. So if it's bothering you and it seems voyeuristic, then you know it's going to get flagged. So you can't have that. And this comes into where ASMR is. So you can't have like lips smacking. Like if they kiss, you can't hear the lips like smacking. Yeah, go figure. Or wet sounds. So in other words, you can't have a kiss where you hear the smacking or the wet sound and the moaning. You can't do that because the computers are trained to recognize that right now. We talked about the ASMR. It's too fetishy. Oh, that's the thing. Going back on the violence, anything like that, you can't get into lingering. So you can't have, like, let's say a killer observing a female victim and he's like his glove is doing this or he's holding a knife and you can't do any of that because that's fetishy. um Even when it lingers on feet or hands, I know people that have a fetish for feet or whatever Tarantino, but he doesn't do it in a way that it feels fetishy, right? It's like it's you know what I'm saying. Or maybe I'm justifying his work. Violence, we talked about. Choking and stabbing, no. Screaming, and I have to dig deeper in this. Screaming is triggering a lot of horror movies, but it's certain types of screaming, like shrieks beyond a certain level. How long is the scream? Is it high pitched? So if you're gonna have a girl scream in a horror film, get somebody who comes from a lower octave, because if you go high, it's gonna get flagged. Because when she screams, we go up one octave, right, or two octaves sometimes, right? You can't have it; it gets boomed, it gets flagged. Drug use, everybody knows that. Don't sniff glue. Yep. Uh, Terror, yeah. This is a hard one. I don't see a lot of war movies being made, but war is triggering, especially in the world we live now with the events going on. So you don't want a situation where even veterans are triggered by gunfire. Like I remember at one company I worked for, the son of the owner, who lived in the office. He was a Vietnam vet. He would hear helicopters. And he just run out with his rifle, and he was triggered. So you have to be very cautious about that. Anything, and you got to think about the wars that have gone through. We still have the Vietnam vets, and they're very much triggered by that. So you have to be very careful about sounds that could trigger that. And then people from Desert Storm, uh, you know, um, coming from a world where there's a constant bombardment and it's blowing out your ears, and then coming to back to America or whatever, this life, it's very jarring, and a lot of people never assimilate back into society. So this is a very important responsibility when you're talking about terror, and war, and the sounds associated with that. Okay, so what's safe? Well, intimacy, if it's sort of a soft breath, um, maybe overlaid. Maui Holcomb, who does our sound mixes, fantastic sound mixer, by the way. He does the sound mix after we make the movie, and he takes all of the pieces that I edit. Like if I lay in a scream, I lay in some music, I lay in gunshots, I lay in punches, and he takes all that and he makes it into a surround piece. So it covers up the bad work that I did. But we had talked about it, and he's always said, like, the more layers that you add, then you cover up some of these inconsistencies and these defects. So that's why I always believe in, like, having a low rum or humble throughout your whole film. It's not subliminal, it's not hypnotic, it's just this low rumble, and maybe even have like an ambient piece throughout the movie. Like Brian Eno comes to mind, like his ambient 1 through 5 music series from the 70s, something like that. And that sort of gets people into a therapeutic mode, especially when it comes for like intimacy. Emotional breakdown. If you're gonna do something where someone's going insane, you want first of all, you can't have them scream. If you have them scream, then you're in trouble. But you can't have them scream beyond a certain octave. What they suggest is they suggest just going silent, that's very emotional. I've seen movies where someone's like screaming and it goes silent. They're going. Sometimes that's more powerful than a scream. I believe I've always believed in that. Um, Violence. They said if there's like a killing scene or violence going on, you should build up the music. So build it up so it's crescendo. Nothing that's going to be triggering music that builds, that builds up and creates the feeling of this terror. Uh, over a violent moment, as opposed to, like, have you ever seen movies? Well, I couldn't even name one, but when someone's getting killed and there's no music, it's pretty uncomfortable because you're just hearing bones crunching and somebody dying. So what they're suggesting, and is to add music and build up that impact. So instead of having gratuitous gore or screaming, you now have music that's accompanying it, and it becomes sort of helping the character. It becomes its own character in itself. Horror movies, yeah, wind and reverb they love. Dream sequences, they keep dreams, so like ambient soundscapes, uh, like Brian Eno. But here's something interesting. They said you can't whisper, and you can't have a scene where someone's whispering in someone's ear. And that I find that bizarre, but you can't do that because that indicates subliminal and ASMR. So you can't do that. Now you could have a shot. You could have a shot where someone's whispering in someone's ear. That's fine. But if the moment you start having them touch their, like they're saying something, then you're in trouble. Now, if it's at a party, everyone shouts at someone's ear. We're not talking about that. We're talking about like a private moment and someone's whispering. Then that's dangerous. Dialogue. Yeah, this I had thought about because a lot of people like to screw around with their own dialogue in movies, especially the experimental filmmakers. They like to distort words. They like to play tracks in reverse. They like to add reverb so that some of the words become unintelligible. They're saying don't do that. They're saying keep your middle ranges clear. Your voice is here. For those of you on your channel EQ on like Premiere and Final Cut Pro, that's your mid range here. So keep the arc. I would say keep the arc here. Well, there's different ways, depends on your movie, but you want to keep that middle range, like you don't because that's the main channel that comes through the center channel. Left and rights are different. Okay, here we go. Sounds to yeah. I mean, we talked about sexual sounds, no moaning. They said instead of moaning, if you must do a love scene, they said add like heartbeats or ambient, like very smooth ambience or soft synthesizer. Uh, you know, for a killing scene, no bone crunching, No stabbing sounds. I know we like that. No choking sounds. You could do instruments like boom, like a bass thump, like someone could get stabbed and you could have like a reverb jump, ba 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 bum or something, but you can't have the crunch. Okay, some words. Yeah, we know this for love scenes. You can't say, "Oh yes, harder, do it more." We know that. We know that. We know that. Um, for ASMR, you can't have the ear to ear. We talked about that. You can't have the microphone like this when you're recording sound. Never ever have the microphone this close to the mouth because that's going to be ASMR when they start talking. You can't do that. In fact, I think they recommend a distance where you should put the mic. First scene. Now, most of us don't have that problem because when we shoot our movies, we never go intense close-ups, so we don't need to have the mic going that close. We go mid-range, so the mic's always here. So I think a lot of that is avoided anyway. Distressed audio, so you can't have a child crying or for a long time. They say to have a muffled child crying, which makes sense. Just throw the filter on it. I mean, do you really need to have a true feeling of a child crying? No, you don't. Just add just add muffles. Um, we talked about dialogue. Your EQ is important. Environmental ambience, yeah, they really encourage that so that you feel like you're in reality. They really encourage like adding wind, uh, adding city soundscapes in the background so that it's not depicted as some sort of fantasy reality or something that's skewed. I mean you know that's pretty easy. They don't want silence, and they don't want silence, which is interesting. And a lot of people like silence. I've seen movies where they literally filmmakers will just have an empty track, and that's a no, 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 no. Never have an empty track on a movie because the meters will see it as empty and they'll flag it. You can have empty, but have what I say, those underlying atmosphere. We call them room tones. So in other words, the room tones that Maui and I use, they're 5-minute tracks. Like it'll say medium sized room, large hall. And we lay it throughout the whole scene because if you have just a complete silence, it gets flagged. So you don't want that. Foley's fine. So footsteps, crinkling of paper. Oh, this is important. Stuff on the radio. You have to be careful what's playing on the radio in the background. So you got to it's got to be something very very neutral and benign. So be careful what you play on that radio in the background. Okay, and this has to do more with like the sound mix when you get it. For your dynamic range, you don't want to go peak. Now, everybody I know, they love to have a strong signal because yeah, I can't hear it on YouTube. I can't, yeah. So lately we've been getting movies where they're going up peak. They're going +2, +4, hitting peaks. And you can't do that because then the sounds get distorted and the words get distorted, and they say, well, you're doing something subliminal, so you can't do that. And not to mention it, FCC guideline says that gets flagged instantly for having audio that peaks like that. The reverb delay. This is bizarre. This is a bizarre one. Mhm. They said you can do like your reverb and delay. Reverb is like, I have to think. Remember the scene from Airplane? I've got to think many mota. So they said you could do that if it's stylized, which it was what I just what the way I demonstrated it. You can't say that you're in a world where people are echoing their voices. That's a no-no. When you record, here we go. This is what I was looking for. When you record on set, they said the microphone should be at least 20 centimeters from your voice, which most of you won't have that problem. The your low pass filters, when you do a mix, there's low, medium, high. So your low ones will filter out some of the dangerous zones that are above it. So especially like breathing, like heavy breathing, the low filter will filter some of that out. So you gotta pay attention when you're mixing. Pay attention really to your EQ, your low, medium to high. You gotta be very, very careful. Uh Dialogue, yeah. Okay, well, this is specific for YouTube. They're saying to put your trailer up first and to see what gets flagged, and then you know. But don't put up your feature first, because if you get banned on that, then there's no chance of it coming back up again. So they're saying test your trailer first to see what comes up. But if you followed most of what I said so far, you won't have this issue. Um, okay, and this is stupid here. Creative alternatives for a sensual scene, they're saying have a cello or a heartbeat. Well, heartbeat, yeah. Violence, have silence, someone getting killed. I agree with that. Anxiety, someone's anxious. You could have a ticking sound. Um, or like there's a great scene in all that jazz when he's gonna have a heart attack and he's doing a rehearsal of his new show, and he goes in to his mind, he's gonna have a heart attack, and you just hear you hear his heartbeat, you hear his breathing. Somebody breaks a pencil and it's very profound, and so they're talking about something like like that, to convey that there's anxiety going on. Spiritual, you can do like Tibetan music. I never saw anything that was like you can't use this instrument. That'd be ridiculous if they said you can't use this instrument. Okay, so now when you export your movie for distribution and you deliver it to an aggregator, let's say Indie Rights or Film Hub or anybody, a distributor even, they're suggesting that you set your levels at -14 as your max for streaming. Um, because when you go higher up, which means you got a stronger signal, a lot of these audio issues, like the subliminal stuff, gets magnified. So they're suggesting if you go -14 on your audio level, the AI won't recognize that that's what's happening. It won't recognize that there's this whole, you know, how do you say it? This picking going on that could be full of a lot of symbolism that's not approved. So they're saying go -14 now. We typically do -12, so we might have to, and I wasn't happy with -12 on the level, because at my TV at home, I'd have to crank it up to like 50 on the level just to hear my movie. I say, how do you get away with this? And apparently, like Netflix wants like -12 to 14. So I get it. But yet people I see constantly on YouTube and even Tubi, they're cranking it. Like there's no reason that your mix should be at +6. Do not do that. And then for theatrical and film festivals, -20 because everything is pronounced. But I mean, in a theater or a festival, no one's giving you content policies, honestly. So I say do what you can. But they do make a good point that in a theater, everything's large and big sounding. So if you give them a -6 and then everything's magnified in a theater, that's gonna like people can't even hear the film. It's gonna be too loud and too distorted. Okay, so this is the last portion of the notes. Hopefully some of you found some of this helpful, maybe not, it's not the best. Don't kill the messenger. This is, it's obviously not the best, you know, it's not the best news I'm giving. Um, so these are now when your movie's done and you are giving your hashtags and keywords and descriptions and even the title of the film to your distributor or aggregator. So specifically, using the word sex or erotic is a no, 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 no. It's going to trigger you instantly. So you want to use like romantic or intimacy, and then that'll work. You never want to use the word nude or nudity. Never, 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 never. You can say bare or exposed or expose the tree. You can say that. You get some leniency if it's an art house movie. Um, I don't know how much more you get, but for all of you who've made an art movie, you know that the numbers today, you're nowhere near making it back. That's why art house distributors are going under if they haven't all already. You cannot use the word fetish or lust. Use obsession or desire. You can't say violence, kill, or murder in a title or description. So no wonder my movie Kill Plan kind of got suppressed. So they say, yeah. So they say use the word conflict, confrontation, crime, or revenge. That makes sense, and that pushes your age lower. Suicide overdose, we talked about that. You could say crisis. You could say despair. Dream, mind control, hypnosis. You never use those words. I think we've got 4 movies that have the word dream in it, and they've been suppressed. And the filmmakers argue with me, and I say, listen, make your own film with your money then. Just kidding. So instead of saying dream, mind control, or hypnosis, then you say memory or surrealism or inner self or inner vision. LGBTQ and gay and lesbian are flags. We're still in caveman days apparently. So they say something like use the word self-discovery or self-realization or identity. But that makes sense because I don't know how many countries, but I'm guessing off the bat there's probably 50 countries that will flag you for LGBTQ content. I mean, in Russia you go to jail, you get executed for being homosexual, for being gay. It's awful. It's awful. So, but that's where we in. That's the world we live in as we move to this homogenization of cultures. We talked about don't say the word drugs, don't say cocaine, don't say heroin. You can say addiction. You can say temptation. You can't say the word God. You can't say religion or prophecy because that implies Christianity, right? So, but you can say faith and spirituality and belief systems. You could say that. War, we talked about it. Everybody knows that, and I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to. I mean, just I guess documentarians could, but no one's there would be no reason to make a movie about such despair in Israel and Palestine. But naturally, right now, those algorithms uh, are against it. But no one's, I would certainly not recommend doing that kind of movie. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, in fact, look, they've signed the peace agreement temporarily. They've withdrawn their troops, so there's no need for this, to make this type of war movie. Um, okay, so this is by genre now, because all of the platforms ask what genre are you in, right? Or give me your keyword or your search word for the genre that you're in. So, art house drama is a good genre that you can get your content passed through. Fortunately for me, I come from the art background, but I'm pretty polarizing, so I've got to try something a little bit different. They say if the art house drama focuses on emotion and psychology, then it works. Well, you can do intimate relationships, that's fine. Uh, Thriller and neo noir is pretty safe, but you don't use the word murder. If you can't do that, you say mystery. You can't say murder. Um, no, nobody really makes this anymore. We saw the market dry up years ago once cable started deleting it. These genres, but erotic drama, I don't think anyone's making that genre anymore. So we don't need to go in that. Okay, horror and psychological horror. Um, you want to avoid when you're making that type of movie in that genre. Obviously we talked about don't doing close-ups of gore. Use the words like metaphysical. This is bizarre though. Who's going to call their horror movie metaphysical? But they're saying if you say metaphysical then it doesn't trigger. If you say supernatural it doesn't trigger. So use supernatural. Don't use That's stupid. Metaphysical is stupid. Who the hell's gonna Okay, documentaries. Well, we know documentaries are controversial, so nothing that's conspiratorial you should not cover, or hate speech. And these days, you can ask 5 people what's hate speech, and you'll get 5 different answers. So you're not going to win at that. You're not going to win. And there's nothing to prove. I mean, we're running into midterms. I mean, the media is killing itself by bashing each other anyway. Let them do their own conspiracy stuff. Experimental category, which I have filled out for some of my own movies. Experimental surreal. They say to use like dreamlike or expressionistic or metaphysical. See, that's where it comes in. If you do an experimental, you could call it metaphysical. So, Keep the first two lines of your synopsis clean with these with the proper keywords. Don't do any of these flags in your first two sentences of your description when you send your metadata over to Amazon, to your aggregators, to whoever, to even your own YouTube channel. Don't use any more than 10 to 15 hashtags, because then they start to think you're spamming and you're latching onto stuff that isn't honest for what the movie is. So I say pick your 10 to 15 hashtags, make sure that they're clean, they're fine, and then just stop there. Don't get greedy. Don't start putting Tarantino in, or stop that. Don't, um the genre, yeah. There's an extension of what we call genre and mood tags. So, for example, you can say indie film. So the genre is indie, and the mood tag would be film. Psychological drama, metaphysical, surreal. Um, you don't want to say like this is hard to explain. They talk about something called clusters. So you don't want to like they say, like the word killing, like you don't want to have killing next to sex scene in description. But if you follow what this says, you'll have neither. But if by chance you do that, you don't want to have one trigger after the other, because then you're in big deep doo doo. Believe me. So, and they give an example, like for example, if you said LGBTQ sex, you get two instant flags for certain countries. You're blocked. So you don't want to do that, nor do you want to say like sex killing, like I just said. Um, this I have to experiment more, do my data research. But these are the regions. So basically, we already know this. Like Middle East and Africa, LGBTQ content is a no-no. No nudity, no religious satire, because everything's very serious. That you have to, So be careful on your keywords. Be careful on your thumbnails. Don't put imagery that shouldn't be there. Don't put symbolism that shouldn't be there. Um, They also, this is interesting, in these countries, they're saying don't have people in contact with each other physically. So in other words, you can't have a hug, you can't have an embrace, obviously you can't have a kiss. So you could have two people, just don't have them touch each other. Caveman times. That's not a critique of that country, okay? This is a critique of our world. South and Southeast Asia, yeah, we know that already. They've got a major drug problem. So you don't want to talk about drug use or suicide or mind control in Southeast Asia and Asia. That's where I think a lot of our what's that pill, that meth pill that's coming from? Well, a lot of it's coming from China too, but um you should position as more of like a psychological struggle in your description. Okay. Don't use those other no-nos. EU in the United States, yeah, violence, self-harm, misinformation. I think misinformation more than anything is going to become more relevant because they're really clamping down on what they perceive as fake news. And the problem is it's to the point where real news is getting suppressed. And I believe that information society, that we live in a world where we must have different viewpoints. There's no left, right, center. We must hear between center and left, and between center and right, and right. Um, hold on. So they're really clamping down on what they consider to be fake news. And I think honestly that Apple installed AI far too soon onto their new releases of the 16, the iPhone 16 and the 17, without actually analyzing what the repercussions would be on humans by doing so. Because I see a lot of rage going on by the use of AI, ChatGPT, um, and I think it's unhealthy. And I think it's going to open up this whole emotional world of psychological disorder that we don't even foresee, and it's happening pretty damn quick. I'll tell you that. Latin America, we talked about that. Nothing of the occult, no Satan, no satanic imagery. So you got to be very careful. No pagans, nothing, no witches. And you gotta think about it. Latin America is a big, big market for streaming. Um, these markets historically financed independent films in the 80s. They love movies. So you owe it to yourself to do a movie that could play there, you know? Like, do you really need to go deeply into a cult, you know? I mean, technically, I don't know, would Rosemary's Baby pass muster today? I don't know. Yeah, symbolism. So use lights, gestures, use symbolism wherever possible. Uh, they say if you don't, when in doubt, emphasize theme over the act itself. So in other words, showing killing or showing control, you're saying this is a thought process about control and the ability to find freedom from control, like a meditation on control. So I don't know that how that fits into a description. Keep your cap. Yeah, we knew this. Keep your captions and your subtitles neutral. So you gotta be very careful. A lot of people don't even pay attention to what their captions look like. I know some people do. Like if you made one film, you better damn look at your captions closely. But if you've done 10, I've done what 100 something films. I can't pay attention and by the way, they every time that there's a new policy that changes for closed captions and subtitles, we have to redo the subtitles. And that's for like 200 movies. But I didn't pay attention till recently, but then I realized like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of keywords and flag words that are in our captions. And sometimes they're not even in the film. It's just the translator did it that way. So you gotta pay attention. Now, there are tools that can help you go through that and analyze. I mean, as much as I was critical just now about AI can go through your transcript and tell you this is a bad keyword. Um, they want you to. I noticed this also recently. They appreciate it when you self rate yourself. So I'll go through our titles and I'll say I give this a 14 or whatever. And they also want you to indicate in your description that um I haven't seen this yet, but they're gonna start doing it. They want you to say something to the effect that like mature themes, but there's nothing explicit in the way of content. They actually want you to say that in a description, so they know that you and your way are sort of self-governing and self-policing yourself. I mean, it's worth a try, right? We talked about the trailer. Let the trailers see what's going on, and that's the best way. That's your best guinea pig to see how much you screwed up on your keywords and your content. They like it when you upload your captions for YouTube as opposed to their translation service, their auto one. They like it when you do it because they assume that you've gone through it and it's approved. So they like that. Uh, this is again for YouTube. You always should say there's no paid promotion. Um, Yeah, I noticed that YouTube by default's been putting uploads into private mode because they want you to analyze it first before you publish it. So you really shouldn't be publishing stuff directly off the bat without running it through a process first, namely your trailer or your descriptions to see if it gets flagged. And by the way, this isn't just about movies, you guys, like a lot of this pertains to music and to books, even art. So anybody that's creative is facing this right now. Um, yeah. So that's I mean that's it in a nutshell. What I just said will be irrelevant next year, but this is the way the things stand now. I think what's happening is that AI is so new that the corporations don't even know how to deal with it, and they want to see how it plays out over the next 18 months or 24 months, uh, to say, okay, well, it's having a negative effect here. Okay, it knows how to self-govern itself here. Let's try this. I'm surprised that federal administration is not doing anything over this. They really should have been doing making proposals to govern this 2 years ago, 3 years ago. It's gonna be too late once they realize that the damage it's already created, then to say, okay, now let's do a law that governs this. It's too late. Now I get that we're in wars. I get we're first and foremost for in an existential fight for our livelihoods, our basic needs in life, food, water, air, shelter, whatever. I get it. I get it. Those take precedence over anything. But in the short term, this may sound like it's perfect for us. The long term, believe me, I think if there isn't enough behavioral disorders going on in the world right now, there's going to be much more uh, the more that AI is being utilized. And what I'm saying, there's different ways. It's like a tool. You could take a pencil, anybody could do it, but you don't want the pencil to pencil the Mona Lisa for you. You want it to be able to help guide you, you know. I use it as a tool. I don't use it to think for me. But the problem is most people are using it to think for them, and that's very dangerous. So that being said, on that sober note, I swear I'm going to speak about food next time. Bye.